Her charms were not to be denied.
Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. With the completion of a set with every job, from your suggestions, I've decided to continue onward with one job per set. However, this time, we decide the job with a random roulette, until we've had each job once more, or until we decide to change it up. For the first set, we have Red Mage on a Wednesday evening. And this set was quite interesting with a strangely high concentration of normal raids. With that said, for duty 1, we have the Lively Princess, and it turned out that Charles knew me. Hello! Hilariously, we had 2 sleeps go through here, and while I got hit by an explosion as a result, but not 2, so I lived, our healer just got to stand there for the full 30 seconds. I am a bit surprised how chaotic things got later in the fight. I'd almost say the fight dragged on longer than normal. For duty 2, we went to certain goods that started in a can. And again, it felt like the duty dragged on longer than usual. In retrospect, instead of just running along the pack while doing nothing, I should have used Riposte to keep up some damage. I don't know how much of a difference it would have made though. The amount of time our tank had to deal with a huge amount of mobs did make me start to consider if maybe I should do some AoE, but we managed to pull through in the end. For duty 3, we went to Majestic Triangle, and things almost went a bit sideways here. Looking at how we went about it, I felt like most of our team had an extremely strong desire to lean towards the West Road specifically, which in retrospect is particularly weird since only about a third of the time does mobs actually come from there. And having everyone stacked on this side means there's a long run if the mobs spawn on the east side, and if no one sees them, well, then we will also be late. The resulting effect is that we had the east side boss come in and bash out an artifact before our team made it over, and I also ended up tanking a bit. The intended behavior, probably, is of course that you have 2 light parties, one on the east, one on the west, and whenever something comes from the middle, you can work together or just mix it up. Everyone going in one big blob doesn't exactly make things go faster necessarily. For duty 4, we went to P11N, Themis. This level range is, at the time of recording this at least, assuming 7.1 changes things, still very weird for Red Mage. To be specific, at level 90, Jolt 3 is 360 potency, while the Fire and the Stone are only 340 potency. Yes, they generate 1 extra mana over Jolt, but even if 1 mana is worth 20 potency, it isn't really. You need enough mana for it to result in another full melee combo, and it has to be a relatively specific timing for that to pay off. I also finished off the fight at about 23 mana, so I would have needed 54 procs, as well as the time to spend that melee combo just for this to have been worth it. Most of this fight is relatively intuitive. Dark means donut AoEs and outside areas being hit, light means circle AoEs and inside areas being hit. The particular mechanic combo that can be less intuitive is the Dark and Light and Sigils of Discord mechanic. Once you get it, it is pretty simple. If you get the light debuff, go in the dark. If you get the dark debuff, go in the light. The thing that can make it difficult to understand is that if you do it wrong at first and then fix it too late, you might just die anyway when Emissary's Will is cast. Another key to keep in mind is that as long as the circles are on the field, you must stay within your appropriate side, even if other mechanics are happening. This is often what can trip up players when Themis does line AoEs and stuff while you have to stay in the circle. Aside from that, the fight goes rather smoothly. For duty 5, we went to A9N, Refurbisher. Already before the boss fight starts, there is a mistake that can be made here. The Faust Z at the entrance does a frontal cleave for a tank buster, but it is actually a shared tank buster, which is why a lone tank taking this has a tendency to really get chunked. Now, the boss itself is one of those where it can go completely sideways if people don't know what to do, especially if you don't have at least one tank that knows what to do. So I considered asking if we should go over mechanics, but then I saw a marker get placed, so I hoped things would be fine and we went for it. Just to go over the mechanics once more for anyone that would appreciate it. First, a quick tip. If you're a tank and you know how to do the mechanics, try to convince the other tank to tank the boss, as that pretty much just requires him to face the boss away. Now, every time dead robots drop down on the arena, a quadrant of the arena will glow, indicating it will drop into the melting pot below. What needs to be done is all the dead robots must be dead over on that quadrant of the arena. Any robots that are already there can be ignored. The power generators can be used to awaken robots, however, the player that placed the generator will be fixated by the robots, so this should be done by the tank not tanking the boss. However, a DPS can sometimes get away with doing it anyway, given the robots don't have that much HP. Failing this mechanic, or ignoring it, will cause Refurbisher to reconstruct itself, which pretty much makes it do more damage. Throughout the fight, a few players will regularly be targeted by spread markers. Taking these while being reasonably close to the boss is a good idea, as it places down trash that you need to hide behind for the scrap burst, as otherwise you take damage and receive a dot. After the robots and power generators have happened twice or so, a full metal Faust drops down on the arena over in the northwest. As long as this Faust is on the field, the boss takes nearly no damage. As this phase goes on, the northwest, then northeast, then southwest, and then southeast quadrant of the arena will drop, and a moment after the southeast quadrant drops, Refurbisher's stockpile will finish casting. And if Faust is still on the field, dead or alive, after the southeast quadrant drops, Refurbisher's stockpiling it leads to an immediate wipe. Now, letting Faust drop in the melting pot alive is also an immediate wipe, as it just explodes for lethal damage instead. So, the simplest way to deal with this mechanic is to pull the Faust to the southeast quadrant and just kill it there and call it a day. This maximizes the amount of time you have to deal with it. However, it also means Faust is on the field until it goes into the melting pot. So, if you want to clear faster, you could have Faust on the southwest quadrant, or if your group really pumps on the damage, the northeast quadrant. Just keep in mind that misjudging your damage could just lead to an immediate wipe, and is that worth it? Once Faust is off the field, Refurbisher can typically be killed off before another power generator mechanic resolves. So anyway, for both of the power generator mechanics in this run, did you notice that I was acting as a tank? Could have sworn Red Mage was a DPS though. Anyway, we made it just fine. For 2d6, we went to O10N, Midgardsormr, and it turned out Cindy knew me. Hello! Super early in the fight, I almost got myself killed by absent-mindedly running away after the first Archmon hit. Weird they haven't updated this stack marker to be a multi-stack, isn't it? The main mechanic that can easily catch you off guard on this boss is these spinny twirly moves. Stitchin' Maw, I think it might be called? Because it is an entirely visual indicator. The way it works is if Midgardsormr flies horizontally twice, it means circle AoE. If he instead flies horizontally and then spins vertically, it means donut AoE. If he spins vertically twice, it means cross AoE. With this information, you know it will be a cross AoE if he spins vertically first. And you can simply move away. Although, keep in mind that the cross is relative to how the boss is facing, so if he's not facing a cardinal direction, intercardinals might not be safe. If you instead see horizontal first, you can already move into a mid-range position so you can adjust between circle or donut after you see the second move. The rest of the mechanics I would say are reasonably intuitive. Although, near the end of this run, we had Slippery Floor combined with this spinny flip thing, and I got hit due to confusing myself. My best advice here is when you see the ice floor incoming, is to move into a position where you're safe from the cross AoE. So, if you see donut AoE, you can slide in, or stay put if either cross or circle happens. Standing in a more close range position can make it awkward to move regardless of what the answer is. For 2d7, we went to M2N, Honeybee Lovely, and both Cindy and Blaine from Thought and Extreme as Summoner are here. Overall, this run went just fine. A healer and all 3 mages died at some point, with me in particular running into issues with getting myself boxed in during the Loveseeker bullet hell. I could have avoided this if I hadn't decided to stand my ground. I was really hoping that I could wait for one AoE to land so I could move there, instead of having to run further for a generally safe spot. What is rather impressive though is despite having about 4 deaths, we managed to skip most of Alarm Pheromones 1 by getting Honeybee Lovely down first instead. That is impressive to me because I feel like I've had groups where no one died, or at least less players died, and we saw all of Alarm Pheromones 1, as well as what came after. So our damage must have been quite impressive. For duty 8, we went to E10N against the Shadowkeeper. And whoops, all mages, and even one of each mage. Ain't that something? Now, this boss has 3 mechanics that can be confusing to work with. The first one is forward, backward, left, right, shadow implosion slash. Or, the shadow cleave mechanics. The way the mechanic works is that the boss projects a shadow, almost like a gate or a portal, and on the ground there is a shadow that almost looks like an arrow pointing forward. That arrow indicates which way the shadow is facing. Then you look at the boss or its cast bar to tell what mechanic is happening. Head up means forward, tail up means backward, sword to the right means right, sword to the left means left. The direction the boss is actually facing is irrelevant when the shadow is present, as the attack will come from the shadow. The real confusion happens when there are 2 shadows in succession, but they resolve in order and use the same move, so either move to a spot that is safe for both, or move to the first safe spot, then the other. The second mechanic is Shadow Warrior. 3 clones appear, and the boss will connect a shadow beam to one of them for a moment. That is the clone that will actually do something. The other 2 are fakes. After that, the clones will shuffle 5 times, moving either clockwise or counterclockwise for each step. Usually, the first time the mechanic happens, they shuffle clockwise 5 times, so the final destination of the real one is 1 step counterclockwise. After the first time, the clones will sometimes shuffle once counterclockwise right at the end, meaning the final destination is the starting point. Once they finish shuffling, the real clone will cleave everything in front of it, so make sure to get to it. The third mechanic is Fade to Shadow. 2 puddles of darkness appear, and both will become very large circle AoEs, making the 2 remaining quadrants the safe areas. This is a very simple mechanic to resolve. However, every time the mechanic happens after the first, the boss will do either forward or backward implosion, so moving too soon can get you caught in a position where you can no longer dodge in time, so make sure to wait until the implosion starts casting before choosing your safe spot. Aside from this, the fight is pretty manageable. For duty 9, we went to A1N, Fist of the Father, and oh look, Cindy is here again. And it was a pretty good pace run. What I found most interesting here is that we all went full blast on Oppressor, yet somehow it was almost like everyone completely halted DPS on the main Oppressor and swapped to the other when the first landed at like 0.5% HP. It still died from incidental damage from dots and such, but that is still impressively precise. And this slowdown enabled us to sneak in about 10% of the second Oppressor's HP before the DPS check started. Not that it was really needed. This Mentor set, for those curious, is still during a Mock Tome event, and Alexander is an option for farming, making A1N a decent spam option. The fastest way to do A1N specifically is for everyone to just attack the Faust and ignore all the ads, which is a little spooky with the ads running rampant, but it can be done just fine. And of course, for the boss itself, holding DPS is the same as slowing down, and if you're speed farming, that's a no-no. And finally for duty 10, we went to O5N, Ghost Train. And we even had 2 monks ready to suplex it. This fight is one of those that feels incredibly confusing. The fight is asking a lot of you, but for the most part, it doesn't punish you that harshly for getting it wrong. Every time spotlights appear, pointing them at ghosts will make them disappear, which is worth considering, because the ghosts in general are very much in the way and wastes time if they grab you. At some point in the fight, the train becomes untargetable, summons a wave of ads, and then you have to jump up on the train. There's a springy platform to use. Run along the train and fight its chimney. When it explodes, you get a debuff that is essentially Doom with an asterisk. Where you had to run away from and avoid the ghosts earlier, the only way to survive this debuff is by being grabbed by a ghost, for some reason, which leads into a solo fight for a brief moment. After that, you can easily wrap up the fight. 7 normal raids in a row is pretty crazy, and it's even crazier that it had 0 repeats and so much variety. 2 Alexander raids, 2 Omega raids, 1 Eden raid, and 1 Pandemonium raid, and 1 Arcadian raid. A bit of everything. Now, in regards to choosing jobs for future sessions, I will be gradually removing the jobs that we have already had from the wheel, so every job gets a reasonable chance. Unless, of course, I end up doing it differently later down the line. That said, I'm pretty glad it wasn't going to be 10 guild hests. Or more, which I was very concerned about with the starting 3 we got. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, Monification used to work very differently. Before Endwalker, melee combos cost a combined 80 of each mana type instead of 50, and Monification simply doubled whatever mana you happened to have. This meant you needed at least 40 of both types for Monification to even lead to a melee combo in the first place. Not to mention that being closer to 50-50 would lead to more extra mana being produced. With Endwalker and the melee combos changing to 50 of each, Monification was changed to give 50 of each. And with Dawntrail, it just gives you 3 freebie tickets for melee combo steps.